Hey y'all, it's your boy Bix 2 back with another video for GEFITT. I don't think you heard me. I said another video for GEFITT. Now, if this is your first time watching the channel, GEFITT stands for Growing Every Day for Infinite Transformation. Again, that's Growing Every Day for Infinite Transformation. Today, I brought a video. I'm going to bring a video to you guys' attention that's discussing somewhat of a hot button topic in today's society. At least I feel like, and that's the concept of fat shaming. Um, uh, and before we actually dive into the topic at hand, fat shaming, I want to just talk a little bit with you guys about the idea or the concept of shame in general. And to do so, I'm gonna just go ahead and, read from the Webster Dictionary. Can't go wrong with the good old Webster Dictionary. And so the Webster Dictionary states that shame, this is one of the definitions, is a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcoming, or impropriety. Another definition, the susceptibility to such emotion. A condition of humiliating disgrace or disrepute, something that brings censure. I can't talk, I guess, or reproach, a cause of feeling ashamed. So, with those definitions, you can kind of gauge from that shame is. It seems like for the most part is not a very positive emotion or feeling. With most of those definitions, there's a very poignant negative connotation that in regards to shame. So like that's just to start the video off. Let's start with the foundation of shame. In general, is something that's not a positive feeling or emotion. And so now let's kind of dive into the actual topic at hand, and that's fat shaming. Before I do that, I want to tell you guys kind of a story. This is a real life story that it didn't necessarily. I wasn't. The story is not something that happened to me firsthand. It kind of is a story that I was alerted to secondhand. But as you can, if you watched my previous videos, the introduction video, then you know that I work as a mail carrier, as a mailman. And so we constantly see publications, from Ebony, I think if they're still in business, from Vogue, from The Times, from ESPN, the magazine. Like, we see all the publications early and often. Like, that's just part of the job. And so I had an older coworker of mine he's probably in the 60s. A guy who is, for the most part, a little conservative in his ideology or his views, which to me that's fine. Like, to each his own. But excuse me. He happened to come across a publication that on the cover of it was probably, I believe, one of the hottest artists in the game. I guess you could say specifically one of the hottest urban acts. And I said urban acts in that way because typically that's kind of a negative connotation, or at the very least, it's boxing the artist into what people will perceive to be pretty much a black audience or a brown or black audience. But she does have some crossover ability. No, she has a lot of crossover ability. And like I said, it's one of the hottest artists in the game, and that's Lizzo. um, and so the older guy came across the publication. Again, I don't recall which publication. And I guess it evoked some type of emotion out of him. And so he was conversing with another coworker of mine, a guy who's probably in his 40s. Um, and this guy tends to be, I would probably consider him a little bit more liberal, just because of the conversations I've had with him. And the older guy, the 60-year-old, was kind of talking to this guy about Lizzo or whatever, and he had I'm not gonna say disdain, but he had a kind of a rude comment, or he had a comment in general about how is this what society is trying to pass off as beautiful, and the younger guy, I guess he in some sense took an exception to that, and he was like, like my girlfriend and her daughter, like they love her because she makes them feel comfortable in their skin, and comfortable with how they look, because growing up, society placed certain limitations on what beauty was, and it was typically, we all know, like pretty thin, blonde head white woman, And here you go, Lizzo breaking the mold of saying, I'm a bigger woman, but I'm bold and I'm beautiful. And I'm gonna carry myself that way, and I would appreciate if you address me that way. And so they had that little dialogue back and forth, and I think it was pretty civil. And I just so happened to talk to the younger guy at some point during the day, and I think it was at the end of the workday, and he kind of like, he looped me in onto their conversation, and we had a little bit of a conversation in which I was like, for the most part, it's a good thing that people are getting more comfortable in their skin. And so that's just kind of a little story about example of fat shaming to some degree. Now, for me, how I view fat shaming is, it's fat shaming to me is de-evaluating, if that's a word. Let me see if it's a word. But it's de-evaluating or belittling or making someone feel less than simply based on the way they look, their weight, um, if if they're a little bit overweight or obese. It's simply making them feel like they're less than because of their weight. Nothing else. Not their personality, not their character, not their skill set, not anything other than you're overweight, so therefore you don't matter as much, or you're nasty, or all these kind of negative connotations that for so long have been associated with people who are overweight. And this is not just coming from somebody who's overweight and is trying to just cape for people that's overweight. Like, this is a real thing that has plagued society for, I don't know, for eons, at least in certain cultures. In certain cultures, being overweight is a sign of wealth, but in Western society, especially in the last, I guess, probably, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years, being overweight has been seen as had a very negative connotation. And so, they had that little dialogue, and like I said, that's what fat shaming is to me. Now, I feel like we do live in a society that's full of extremes, right? Like, there's in one camp is like, if you're overweight, if you're obese, then like you're a burden on society, and you have no value in society, and you're terrible, and all of these kind of crazy innuendos. And then you have on the opposite side, or the polar opposite side, you have people who are kind of like, you can weigh as much as you want, and it's not a problem. Like, being obese and morbidly obese is okay, and you shouldn't try to do anything to change. Uh, your lifestyle or anything. Like it's all grand, and so it's kind of like that's the extremes I feel like in society we're operating at right now. Whereas for most of the things, I'm in the middle. Like my mentality or my mindset is in the middle, or as close to the middle as possible. Whereas like if you're fat or obese or morbidly obese, as I am, like that's just like I would say I'm who I am, and I happen to be obese, right? Because being overweight or obese is only a small portion of who I am. Um, and then, you know, so it's only a small portion of who I am, but at the same time, like, as somebody who can speak from experience, as somebody who's obese and probably would be considered morbidly obese, I understand the long term ramifications of being obese and that the health implications from being obese is just not good. Like I put myself at risk for diabetes, high blood pressure, and all kind of things that could lead to a fatal end earlier than what could be if I was quote unquote more healthier. So that's just kind of my mindset is like, yes, if you're obese, morbidly obese or overweight, like that doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. Like, could you lose some weight? Of course, that's fine, that's perfect. But that don't make somebody who's obese feel like they're worthless. Like that's just not cool, and it's just not productive. And so that's kind of like my viewpoint on fat shaming. Like, is it a real thing in society? Yes. Like it has been for a while. Me growing up in the 90s, like there was a lot of, and I know I'm going based off of the entertainment industry, but there were a lot of like bigger girls, specifically girls, because bigger guys have always kind of got the pass, from, you know, Notorious B.I.G. to Heavy D to Big Pun to um, Gerald Levert, not Ruben didn't, I guess. Luther Vandross, the Fat Luther. Like men have always kind of gotten a pass, but as far as with women, it's never really been a big thing for them to get a pass. I grew up. I guess some of them did. I guess I grew up, and I grew up watching Queen Latifah. I grew up watching Monique. And I know you can feel however you want to feel about her, but Monique was dope, and it still is talented. Like you can't deny that. Who she is personally. Like I mean, that's up for debate if that's what you want to do. But she's a dope talent. Who else? Missy Elliott. Um, who else? I can go on and on. Jennifer Hudson when she was bigger. Jordan Sparks when she was bigger. Like all these women, and then probably the one who I had, a lady who I had the biggest crush on when I was younger was Kelly Price. Like she has a voice of an angel. Like I love her, and I still do. She's amazing. And then you have somebody now, Amber Riley, who I think is just extremely talented. Lizzo, extremely talented. And these are all bigger women, but all the bigger women and the bigger men have something in common. Like they're dope, talented individuals who just happen to be overweight. Like who they are as people has way less to do with their weight than anything else. So like that's just kind of my mentality when it comes to fat shaming. Is you can't just single out people because they're fat. Like what is that person's attitude? Because there's a-holes and there's great people who come in all shapes and sizes and colors and race and ethnicities, like uh, social economic groups, any walks of life. Like there's great people. There's good people who have great character that are skinny, and same thing as fat. And there's some people who are just terrible human beings that are skinny, buff, fat. Like it all is a gambit of things. It's not like you're fat, so automatically you're a terrible person. Like that's just ridiculous. And to even think that way is mind boggling. Um, but before I just keep rambling and rambling, I kind of want to, you know, talk about the idea of shaming someone into doing anything productive. Like that in itself is counterproductive. Like it literally is. Because oftentimes, like I'm gonna speak from experience, as somebody who has dealt with weight issues their whole life, and probably will continue to struggle with it their whole life, even if I get into the most extreme shape of my life, like it's still gonna be something that I have to constantly work at. I'll never just be completely over it because in a moment's notice, I can get right back to where I was. So somebody who has struggled with that, most of the time, when you struggle with your weight, I'm say majority of the time, I can't speak all the time, but a lot of times you're struggling with self-confidence issues, self-esteem issues. Um, and so what happens is, which at least with being overweight is, when somebody tries to shame you into losing weight or working out or whatever it is, to change your lifestyle, what happens is when you use shame, oftentimes somebody, it's like every negative thing you can say to that person, like they've probably thought about it towards themselves 10 times as much. And the worst thing you can say, they probably thought of something worse to say about themselves. And that's how they feel about themselves. They carry that with them on a daily basis. So when you shame them, most of the time all you're doing is you're legitimizing and reinforcing all the negative things they already think about themselves. So you're just compounding on the issue, which oftentimes will lead them to go deeper and down the hole, lead them to isolation. Um, like I said, deeper into whatever it is they're doing in this regard, probably overeating and being depressed and not working out. Like you're probably gonna actually be counterproductive. Um, and so oftentimes, and that's just with anything. That's with drug addiction, porn addiction, um, whatever it is somebody struggles with. When you shame them, you oftentimes you'll isolate them. You'll what you won't get a productive, positive response. Like you just won't. A lot of times. Now there's exceptions for every rule. There's some people who were fat shamed into losing 100 pounds. And they never look back. But for the most part, it's just not a productive means to an end. It's just not. And so I kind of want to, as we kind of doing it down to the end of the video, I just kind of want to give a spiritual aspect of it. You know, Oftentimes when you're fat shaming somebody, it's the words you use. It's you got a friend who's overweight, and yeah, you might joke with them. It may be a joke, and you may talk about their weight all the time, and they're the butt of every fat joke that you can think of. And or even if you're being serious with them and you're shaming them about their weight, um, oftentimes we don't realize the power of words. And if you read the Bible numerous times, quite often, Old Testament, New Testament, it talks about the power of words. And it's very, very deliberate, it's very strong with the power of words. And so I just kind of want to, as we're doing it down to the end of the video, I kind of want to just leave you guys with some of the verses that the Bible talks about in regards to your words that you use. And so we're gonna start off with we're gonna start off with Proverbs 15:4. Proverbs 15:4 says, "The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit." Um, and, Proverbs is the book of wisdom. It has a lot of wisdom in it, and so it has a lot of verses in regards to the tongue. Um, I'm struggling right now. Work with me. Um, do not in Ephesians 4:29 it says, "Do not let unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." So I just want to lead you with those two verses. And so again, in Proverbs, it states, soothing words can be like a tree of life, but then harsh words, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. And then in Ephesians, it says, do not let any unwholesome come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So again, in both of those verses, it's showing you how powerful the tongue is. If you if there's somebody in your life, it's a relative, it's a loved one, it's a spouse, um, anyone, a friend that is struggling with their weight, then you have to ask yourself when you're speaking to them, trying to redirect them and get them on the right path. Uh, in what spirit are you leading in? That's important. In what spirit are you leading in? Are you leading in the spirit of love, or are you leading in the spirit of um, hate, or um, spirit of destruction, a spirit of ill will? Like, what spirit are you leading in? And I've been guilty of it I've been guilty of it recently. If I'm being honest with you guys, was telling somebody about themselves in a very, I guess, a very vindictive spirit, a very harsh spirit, and a very kind of a judgmental spirit. And the thing about it is, what are you trying to accomplish when you do that? When you lead from that spirit, um, and when you don't lead with a spirit of love, like if there's somebody who's struggling with their weight, then lead with a spirit of love, and it can be tough love. It doesn't have to be lovey-dovey, soft. It can be tough love. But an example is, if you know somebody who's struggling with their weight, right, and you really are afraid that you know if they don't get it in check, that it can have a disastrous effect on their life, then one way you can approach them is, just let them know how much you appreciate them and you value them as a friend or as a loved one. And then, let them know, like, hey, I really am afraid that, I might get that call one day of you being rushed to the emergency room because you had a heart attack or a stroke or something of that nature. And, I really have love for you and I really want you to be here for the foreseeable future. And, what can I do to help you? Because that may be you getting them a membership at Planet Fitness. You picking them up every morning, taking them, and you paying for the cost. That may be you going grocery shopping one someday, and you being like, "This is how we gonna meal prep for you for the week." Like when you leading in the spirit of love, then at the end of the day, your whole goal is, how do I get this person to change the direction of their life? Like, um, and oftentimes we get caught up in the message, or we get caught up. Sometimes it becomes more important. You have to. Sorry, I'm tripping right now, but you have to figure out what's more important. Is the messenger, you, more important than the message? And also, what's most important? Is it most important to deliver the message, or for the message to actually strike a chord with that person? Um, and that's what you have to ask yourself when you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with weight issues, is when you're trying to correct it and you're trying to help them out, like, what spirit are you leading in? Because you should be trying to build them up, not tear them down. Because more than likely they've torn themselves down multiple times. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on fat shaming. It's a real thing, and it's something that seems to be more prevalent in today's society because, I live in Oklahoma, and it's one of the most obese states in the nation. And there's a lot of factors in that we're not going to get into, but today anyway. But again, shame is just not a way, for me, for the most part, it's not a productive means to an end. You know, I would much rather you lead with a spirit of love and to try, so you can try to correct or, help somebody along their way. That's the most important thing. Lead with a spirit of love. So yeah, that's my thoughts on fat shaming. Yes, it's a real thing, and yes, it's something we as a society have to work on. But yeah, that's what I got for you guys today. Love you guys. Again, subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified every time I drop a video. I love you guys, and have a good one. Peace.